Hi, my name's Rich Bunn. I'm an Army veteran, and I've been trying to be a writer for about 10 years. I've probably written about 6 books, and none of them have ever been successful in finding an agent or a publisher. It's just a very saturated market, I think, and maybe what I'm writing is not quite good enough. So I'm hoping with this project that the community that has grown up around me as I've started to make funny videos and silly content will enjoy listening to this, but will also critique it. I'm hoping that you'll put a lot of feedback in the comments about what you like and don't like, and when it starts to bore you, and the things that should be changing and the things that don't ring true and the things that you think should happen next. I'll be writing this and recording it as I go so that you get both the book and the audiobook versions at once. And hopefully by doing it chapter by chapter like that, we'll come up with something decent and I can test and adjust as we move forward together. It is fiction. I just want to be really clear about that up front. Although I'm a veteran and although I've flavoured this with my own experiences to try and make it seem real, it's not real. It's a fictional account of a fictional person, so any resemblance to other characters, live or dead, is entirely coincidental. Thanks for listening. Oxygen Thief by Rich Bunn. Chapter 1. I was dropped off at my first regiment on a Sunday afternoon by bus. Public bus. And I only mention that because I've never seen a military movie that started with a public bus. It wasn't full, no one moved their coats over the spaces or scowled at me. I didn't end up getting a seat next to another military guy who wanted to talk about his sweetheart, or his love of shrimp, or his favourite caliber rifle. They weren't playing 1970s Vietnam rock on the radio. It was empty, it was a normal bus. Well, it was empty apart from me and the driver. I had to walk from about the last half mile or so, massive military burden on my skinny shoulders, and as the barracks came into view, I remember it looking very imposing, kind of like a castle. But as I got closer, that castle started to shrink, and by the time I got to the gates, it was obvious that everything was a lot older and shitter than it had appeared from afar. The iron gates were rusted open, and security was now courtesy of like a little guard room with a plexiglass window. Sort of the kind you find at the post office. I could see that the man behind that window was not even military. He was wearing a cheap-looking uniform from a private security firm, and he was in fact so fat that I couldn't see the chair he was sitting on. I could see that he was squeezing a large tube of cheese spread. I couldn't see what he was squeezing it onto, so maybe he was just applying cheese spread to his own legs. Anyway, I approached and showed him my army ID. Good morning, I'm Private Hare. I've just been posted here. It's my first day. Further, said the guard in a bored voice thick with primula. Excuse me? Further. His eyes moved from me to a camera above and then down to a yellow cross on the ground. Only his eyes seemed to move like a hostage trying to convey meaning without alerting any kidnappers. You need a photo for our system. Having had my photo taken, I was given a brown envelope. It said Block 9, Room 4, and there was a key inside. Thank you, I said. Where do I go? The man pointed up the hill and then returned his attention to the tube of cheese. The conversation was apparently over. So I walked into the camp and up the hill in the vague direction of some distant buildings. There was weirdly no one around. I mean, maybe I should have expected it. It was, after all, August, and the whole month is referred to by the Army as block leave. 4 weeks in summer when it's mandatory for all personnel to take holiday. I didn't have a complete grasp of the military sense of humour yet. But a reporting date weeks before any other people would get here seemed about right. The military, as I was gradually learning, are sick fucks. It was very peaceful. It had a kind of Dad's Army vibe. The buildings I could see were red brick. They were old but nicely maintained. There were lots of trees, lots of grass that was high and kind of browning in the summer heat. The chirrup of crickets. It was nice. Only the gates, the flags, and some very elderly military equipment on display in gravel gave it an army flavour. Dear Dad, I've arrived at my first military regiment as a fully trained soldier. I had a nice teacher in school who once suggested to me that I write a letter to my non-existent father. That was 10 years ago, and I was still writing it. No one around. I mean, it was weird, Army and its fucking gallows humour. My first taste of that, by the way, was the day in basic training we had our photos taken for our ID badges. Those pictures were only changeable after 10 years in service, so we'd all made an effort to look good. But poor working class kids in their teens have a funny idea of what good means. So we had boys in shiny suits, girls in too much makeup. We had soldiers that were wearing gold chains and puffer jackets and jeans, and we had others dressed like they were off to the prom. Then the training corporal had walked in, laughed, marched us straight to the barber's. We'd been given a compulsory clippered No. 2 haircut. We were then made to change into Army issue PT kit. Itchy, bobbly green t-shirts, blue shorts, high-tech silver shadows. And we were taken for a 5-mile run in November. And only after we were alternately red-faced, sweating, shorn and looking as bedraggled as possible had we been marched immediately to get the pictures taken. We hadn't been allowed to shower or change or go to the loo. My picture looked like a photo of a prisoner from the First World War. The corporals had virtually cried with laughter. Anyway, back in my first proper regiment, I had reached the accommodation blocks. Although no one seemed to be around, I still half expected to get shouted at. Even during block leave, camps are not fully empty, because any barracks contains a number of block rats. Those are destitute, Commonwealth or other soldiers who basically have nowhere better to go. Most of my exposure to the British Army so far had involved shouting. I don't know what I thought would happen as I stepped inside, but maybe like a scene in which I had toilet paper thrown at me, whilst people chanted, "New fish!" or "Dead man walking." Maybe I watched too many prison movies. Anyway, it was a normal block and it was silent. I found my room, which was mine alone, a massive upgrade from the 8-man dormitory I'd shared in basic training. That had been like a prison, with its steel-framed beds and waterproof rubber mattresses, and at least 4 penises flopping around at any one time, due to the endless succession of changes into different kinds of uniform. That had been a nightly horror of unconsciousness through sheer exhaustion, to be woken up by shouting at any second, or by the painful grey dragging of limbs into a waking purgatory of parades and greasy breakfasts and the inescapable smell of eggy farts. This room was actually an ensuite, with a little attached bathroom and a full-sized walk-in wardrobe. So I sat on my bed, in an empty flat, in an empty block, and I watched the light slowly drain from the day. And I thought again of the army recruitment videos, which were full of people explaining they'd made the best friends they could have possibly imagined. Right, I found myself saying over and over. Chapter 2. "Here, get your arse down!" Conklin shouted as I lay in the dirt. I was breathing hard enough to taste blood, my chest heaving like I was having a seizure. It was 8 months or so later. At the end of block leave, people had gradually started to appear. By the time they came back, I didn't really want them to. But regardless of what I wanted, cannons had been wheeled out and mounted at the guardroom, flags had been raised. People in uniform had started to appear to change out the paper orders that were pinned up all around the camp, and guards had appeared with dogs and rifles. I had met some of my new flatmates. First came the 2 female soldiers, Jackson and Walsh. They put their heads around the door simultaneously. "Hiya!" Then came Greaves. He'd knocked on the door an hour before my first morning parade. "You new?" Yes, hello." He nodded. "Cool. Hang about here and I'll show you where the squadron lines are. You don't want to miss the morning inspection, lad." It had taken me until 8:17 to realise that Greaves had in fact left without me. By that time, everyone else had left as well, and I only had the vaguest idea where the squadron lines were. Technically, the inspection began at 8:30, but everyone was really expected to be on parade at 8:20. I was in trouble. I started to run in the vague direction where I thought they were, and halfway there I made a mistake and cut across the grass as a shortcut. On army barracks, you are not allowed on the grass. Oh! It was a noise of fury. A single word screamed in a Welsh accent. I froze, realising the voice was directed at me. I'd been caught on the grass on my first day at the regiment. This was very bad. Someone in basic training had told me once that the only thing worse was doing it on a Royal Navy base, as those were technically classified as ships. He'd said that in a Navy base, if you were caught walking on the grass, they'd shout "man overboard" and tackle you to the ground before dragging you back onto dry land, i.e. the pavement. But this was pretty bad. And now a florid man was marching over to me. His body inclined almost to 45 degrees as if he was battling a strong wind. He almost didn't look like a real person as much as like a Punch cartoon. Both short and stout, he was the kind of fat that you get if you eat and drink a lot and yet still stay fit, so that it all seems to go on your face and your organs and into a beer belly. He was red-faced, and as he got closer, I could see black eyes, black moustache, and rage. I could also see a captain's rank slide, so I saluted immediately. But by the time he got to me, that officer was critically out of breath, and so for the first 10 seconds or so, he just stood without speaking, staring hard at me while he recovered. His nostrils twitched, his bulging, sweat-flecked eyes reminiscent of a cart horse. It was terrifying. "What's your name, boy?" he demanded at last. It's Private Hare, sir," I said. "Hare as in rabbit?" Yes, sir." Unexpectedly, he put an arm around my shoulders. He gripped too tight and spoke too soft. "My name's Jones, Captain Jones. I came up through the ranks myself, didn't I, young rabbit?" "Yes, sir." Jones gripped my shoulders again hard, as if barely controlling himself. His voice was syrupy with malice. "I wouldn't have walked on the grass when I was a private soldier, bunny boy," he said softly. No, sir." "I wouldn't have let my private soldiers walk on the grass when I was a lance corporal. And I would have gripped my lance corporals if they let private soldiers walk on the grass when I was a corporal." Captain Jones's voice was getting louder and louder. His face, which had cooled to an unhealthy yellow, was now red again. "I would have charged my corporals for letting a private soldier walk on the grass when I was a sergeant." It took everything I had to stand still, as Captain Jones basically shouted directly into my face. I could see the veins on his temples, and I kept thinking he was going to hit me. I was beyond terrified. "And I would have thrashed my sergeants for letting a private soldier do it when I was a staffy." There are 7 army ranks between private and captain. Captain Jones screamed his way through all of them. He was spitting on me by the end, incoherent, inhuman, screaming at the top of his lungs. "I'm not going to attack that! Now I'm a captain!" He turned away from me at last. "Now fuck off," he finished. Shuddering, heaving, halfway between orgasm and heart attack, he lurched away, and I, covered in spit and temporarily deaf, basically collapsed. Finally, I made it to the squadron, recognising Walsh, Jackson and Greaves on parade amongst the masses. Astonishingly, it was actually only 8:29, and a sergeant was addressing everyone. She looked angrily at me as I approached sheepishly. "You must be Hare. Late on your first day? You better have a fucking amazing excuse." I got stopped by a Captain Jones." The sergeant waved a hand. "In that case, mate," she said, almost sounding sympathetic, "you've definitely been punished enough. Get fell in." After that, I reported for duty 10 minutes early every day. The strange thing was that no one ever really told me what to do. In fact, no one ever really talked to me much. I managed to fall into the routine of hanging awkwardly around the vehicles whilst other soldiers worked on them, sweeping up, eating, drills, inspection, PT, rifle cleaning, and my least favourite thing of all, our monthly basic close combat skills training lesson, which gets us all caught up to where I am now, crawling across the hard ground of a scrubland forest, practicing section attacks. Here, get some fucking fire down range. As shots rang out, I raised my rifle to my shoulder and returned fire blindly, falling awkwardly back to the ground. As I did, the magazine fell out of my rifle, proving I hadn't reloaded it properly. Worse than that was that I knew the training corporal was watching. He was pretty much always watching me because I was new and a klutz, aka a bully's wet dream. Around us there was the staccato of machine gun fire. "Baseline!" shouted Coughlin. "Baseline!" We had PRRs, which were little radios and headsets, but everyone inevitably started shouting whenever we were attacked. "Alpha team, prepare to move! Move!" I got up, stumbled a few steps, collapsed again into wet grass, and tried to clear enough sweat from my glasses to see anything. "Right, bite." Coughlin had crawled over to me and the other two men in our fire team. "Here's the plan. Bravo to cover. We assault. Jackson and Walsh go firm at 45 degrees to enemy. Reference oak tree. All seen?" "Seen," said the other two soldiers and I. We followed Coughlin's outstretched arm as he pointed where they would move to. "Bravo team, check fire. Rabbit and I run to 12 o'clock. You two cease fire. We post a grenade and it's back home in time for tea and medals." Coughlin always managed to make everything he said sound cool. "Okay, let's go." We began to crawl into the cover, which frankly was mostly nettles. Once hidden, though, we were able to stand up and advance on the machine gunner undetected, whilst the other two laid down fire. Soon we were very near. I couldn't see him, but holy crap, it was loud. Coughlin made a throwing motion to indicate that I should throw the practice grenade into the gun nest of the enemy. I am shit at throwing, so I'd kind of been hoping he was going to do it himself. We sprinted across the last patch of ground, as with a silent prayer I thrust my arm forward and unclenched my fingers. The grenade sailed onwards, bounced, and, by a miracle, fell into the machine gun nest. Coughlin and I hit the ground and covered our ears. "Stop, stop, stop!" It was the signal from the training corporal, telling us we were finished. I was so happy. Still, as directed, we remained on the ground waiting for the explosion. "Don't bother, lads," sneered Corporal Robinson, the training corporal. He picked up his own radio and said something. All firing ceased. Everyone stood up from where they were and began to trudge wearily in for debriefing. The corporal walked over to the nest, stepped into the mass of expended shells that surrounded the enemy gunner, and picked up the unexploded dummy grenade. "Absolute shit show," sneered Corporal Robinson. He was a beefy man with a brummy voice like a roller coaster, full of unexpected ups and downs. "And you, worst of all here, you absolute sprog. You're a joke, an embarrassment to my regiment. You didn't return fire before you took cover, did you? You threw that grenade like a T-Rex trying to flag down a ride on a brontosaurus." He looked at me, but I was thinking of hitchhiking dinosaurs. "I asked you a question, sprog. God, you're a sorry excuse for a human. Now, do you know why your grenade didn't go bang?" "No, Corporal." "Because you didn't take the pin out, you friggin' oxygen thief." Every member of the section turned to laugh at me. Great. Chapter 3. It was Monday morning. On a Monday morning, the Sergeant Major of C Squadron conducted an inspection. All doors were thrown open, with each soldier standing beside their immaculately made bed. If you're not that familiar with the British Army, this isn't the kind of inspection you see in the movies. It's simply a check that the room is clean, tidy, and organised, and it's an inspection of the soldier themselves. But no one bounces a ball on the beds, there's rarely any screaming in people's faces, and absolutely no soldiers shouting that their rifle's name is Susie. The Sergeant Major's name is Tommy McLean. He's a lanky Lancashireman, an ex-boxer, a paratrooper, and a Scrooge. Today, He's stalking in and out of the flats with the lazy disinterest of a predator. McLean is hard as nails. Sergeant Majors are always expected to be hard as nails, which is actually quite a hard thing to be. The ones that aren't often fall into the trap of trying to act like they are. And this made McLean one of the better sergeant majors in the regiment, since he had nothing to prove. McLean steps into my flat and into the first room. Private Jackson's bed space is as clean and spare as she is herself, a well-scrubbed young woman with her hair in a neat bun and laughter lines forming around her blue eyes. The walls in the flats are so thin that I can hear every word. "Morning, Jacko." "Morning, sir." "That a new killer's poster, eh?" "Yes, sir. Went to see him last week." "Nice one. Mind you, I heard them closed down V-Festival last year and they were crap. No atmosphere at all." "Probably just hungover. I was at Highlands that year and they were absolutely off the hook." "Aye. How's tricks anyway?" "Fine, thanks." "Good." McLean's eyes sweep across the corkboard of photos on the wall above Deborah's bed, and then he turns his attention to her uniform. "You iron that shirt?" "Yes, sir." "What with, a fucking brick?" "No, sir." "All right, chill out." McLean steps out of the room and into the next. This one has an abundance of soft toys, heavy curtains, and a thick red rug on the floor, a hand-knitted throw on the bed, and a string of shells hung in the window. It smells of vanilla and perfume. It smells of beaches, coconut oil, and holidays. And although it isn't allowed for soldiers to paint their rooms, the occupant has sidestepped this rule by blue tacking up wallpaper instead. "Morning, Welsh." "Hiya, sir." There's a smile in the voice of Private Welsh, one which makes it clear she isn't intimidated by McLean, a man most everyone else is terrified of. Of course, Private Welsh is drop-dead film star gorgeous. Under Cleopatra lashes, she has eyes fizzing with intelligence and good humour. Unlike Jackson, she's wearing a lot of fake tan and as much makeup as she might reasonably be expected to get away with. Welsh has a body that manages to make military uniform look appealing, which is pretty impressive as most military uniform is exactly as sexy as can be expected from 5 tubes of camouflage material sewn together with a lot of pockets. "Well done on winning that netball tournament. You did the squadron proud." "Thanks, sir. We celebrated with a massive Greggs run and then went night clubbing." "Can take the girl out of Wigan, eh?" "It's all right, sir. Jaeger bombs all round." "Smells suspicious in here. You've been burning scented candles, Welsh." "It's a Glade plug-in, sir." "Don't you lie to me." "I'm not, sir." McLean looks hard at Private Welsh, who blushes. She's fearless, but she is honest. "Sorry, sir.
They're a fire hazard and they're not allowed. If it fucking smells like French vanilla in here next week, you'll be on guard duty for the weekend. Understood?"
"Understood, sir." He walks out and into the next room.
"Morning, Greaves."
"All right, sir." In a different way, Scouse Greaves is also gorgeous. 6 foot tall and athletic, Greaves was a golden boy, a squadron hero representing the regiment for athletics, football, and cross-country.
P Company selection next month. You going to be ready?
"Been training hard, sir." Greaves flexed, causing his biceps to bulge.
Been training your pints up in arm, more like.
McLean gives Greaves a leisurely once-over, his eyes crinkling.
"You had that shirt tailored, Scouse?"
"No, sir." WO2 McLean steps close to Scouse, who twitches slightly despite himself. McLean's voice is cold, clipped, and resonant.
"You've had that fucking shirt tailored. I can see where it's been taken in at the back and round the sleeves. You want all the ladies to know how buff you are, don't you?"
"No, sir."
"I'm going to phone up the QMSI at Colchester and tell them we're sending our prettiest soldier for P Company in some lovely autumn apparel. And I might tell them about the time you cried on that stretcher race as well."
There was laughter from the corridor. The sergeant major's teeth showed for a second and then vanished again behind cracked lips.
I wasn't bloody crying. I had camouflage cream in my eye, protested Greaves hotly. Yeah. Nice boots. Make sure you're wearing an issued shirt next time I see you. Cheers, sir. Morning, Coughlin. Private Coughlin is the toughest and most laconic junior in the regiment. A man of that rare type as inherently practical as a Swiss Army knife. He could fight, fix vehicles, strip weapons, and read a map better than almost anyone else. Boat you, sir? Coughlin spoke to everyone in the same cool, unimpressed tone. If he was American, he would have been a cowboy. Never mind fucking boat you. You're not in Bangor now, fella. No, sir. That a fucking soda fowl under your barry there, Coughlin. I ate it this morning, sir. I want you to try out for biathlon this year. I can't ski. Well, neither can any of the other twats in this squadron, except Sazzle and Peters, and they're both shit marksmen. Learn. Aye, sir. The Sergeant Major entered my room. Morning, Hare. Morning, sir. I waited, not looking directly at him or anywhere other than straight forward. I hoped that perhaps this would be the day I merited some of the easy small talk I always hear from the other rooms. As I wait, I try to imagine what McLean sees when he looks at me. A slight young man in thick army-issue spectacles, visibly nervous around senior soldiers and women, not great at team sports. My room contains no photos, a collection of about 30 paperbacks, a ceramic owl my granddad gave me, and a wooden nose I put the spectacles on at night. Well done. McLean shakes his head and leaves the room. And a few moments later, the flat. All occupants heave a communal sigh of relief. Welsh steps into the corridor and quietly closes the main door. All right, coast is clear. The soldiers come out of their rooms and congregate in the living room. I sit on the sofa next to Jackson. Greaves jumps onto the largest chair and Coughlin slouches on a stool. After a scan of the corridor through the peephole, Welsh joins a few moments later. Oof, that were painful to listen to, Rabbit. The other members of the flat called me either Rabbit or Bunny Rabbit. The British Army thrives on nicknames. In my squadron alone, there is a Taff, a Jock, a Paddy, a Tug, a Bobby for Charlton, a Scouse, a Mick, a Specky and a Titch. I was actually glad not to have gotten Specky, although I occasionally got Hairy, Hairbrain, Hairball, or worst of all, Hairy Arse the Specky Bum Bandit. Rabbit's actually one of the better nicknames on camp. A nod. I'm too new, I say. That's all it is. Leg's newer than you. Jackson points out. Everyone talks to her. She's a pretty girl, I say indignantly. Of course they talk to her. Anyway, I'm not sure having all the seniors sleazing on you is better than being ignored. You're bloody right there, love, says Welsh. I get up to put the kettle on. When in doubt, Mum always says, make tea. In the kitchen is a huge ancient brown teapot that's probably been passed soldier to soldier since the 50s. Hey, has the team got any biscuits? Asks Greaves, prompting a groan from the others. I've got some custard creams, I say. Bloody hell, Bunny Rabbit, you don't have to feed this fat wanker. That's half your problem, Welsh says, putting her legs across Greaves's knees. I've got a problem. I brought through the teapot and Jackson leant forward to pour it out. She usually poured the tea, sewed the badges, and darned anything that needed darning. You're too nice, Jackson said as Welsh nodded. You're not the butler. You don't have to follow us round with a tray of tea things. It's just a bit wet. McLean's one of those guys who doesn't know what to do around nice people. If you were more of a twat, I think he might like you. More of, well, that's just unfair. I don't know how to be a twat. Our Scouse, said Jackson. Everyone laughed, although Coughlin's was more of a twitch of the lips. Greaves looked up at us all, gave a big smile, and then drank the rest of the milk straight out of the jug. What the fuck, Scouse? Asked Coughlin hotly. Greaves shrugged. Gotta keep me protein levels up if I'm going to smash P Company next week. A walk to the fridge won't kill you, Paddy. I told you not to call me that, growled Coughlin. Calm down, love, said Welsh. She transferred her legs from Scouse to Coughlin, a mark of her favour. Don't let this moron get to you. You can share my tea. And you can share mine, Rabbit, said Jackson. That will last of the milk. Oh, you're such a prick, Scouse, said Welsh. He were the one that bought that milk. Poor rabbit. Life's unfair, said Greaves. Now, I believe there's just enough time for me to rub one out before the morning parade. The others groaned. Welsh, Jackson and Cochran went outside to the smoking shelter, but I didn't go with them. I do smoke a bit, of course, because all junior soldiers smoke. It's purely for practical reasons. Smoking is the best time to catch your boss when he's relaxed, and virtually the only approved reason to take a break. But like most soldiers' pleasures, I don't really like it. What a shit soldier.